Welcome back to Energy and the Human Organism. My intention with today's video is to observe the winter solstice. Today is the winter solstice. And I'm very excited today because I had a lot of fun preparing this material. Because it brings us to a conversation about cycles. And we all have been talking about feedback loops in our physiology, which is a form of a cycle. Cycles move around this central point, which we understand to be something we can refer to as homeostasis, this baseline middle point that feels familiar and is kind of a rolling average of our experience so far. The winter solstice is one phase of an annual cycle that our planet moves through every year. We have circadian cycles, which are related to our light and dark, day and night rhythm that our physiology is very accustomed to. That is how we have developed as a species, is in those types of conditions. And we also have, as we mentioned, our physiological cycles, our metabolic cycles, that is everything from the cycle of respiration, of breathing in and out, and all of the inputs and outputs that are affected by that particular cycle. And we have other cycles in our physiology, such as the ability to heal from an injury or heal a wound, our ability to digest food, our ability to filter our blood. All of these are examples of cycles in our body. And so, just for fun, we're going to talk about the annual cycle, starting here with the winter solstice. The planet, the planet Earth that we live on, astronomically, gets all of its energy from the sun, which is our nearest star. It's the center of our solar system. All of the energy that comes into the planet comes from the sun in the form of radiant energy, in the form of heat and light that is absorbed by its organisms and utilized as energy. At the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, the planet is tilted away from the sun. So instead of having our face to the sun, we have our back to the sun, and that creates a general cooling of that particular hemisphere of the planet because we have less energy. It's interesting to me that during the winter, the planet is actually closer to the sun than it is during the summer, but in the northern hemisphere, because of this tilt that we're talking about, we still experience that as cooler. Even though we're closer to our energy source, we experience coolness and decrease of energy. And I just think that that is a special moment to observe, because it demonstrates the delicacy of how these systems and conditions interact. I did not say fragility, but the delicacy, the elegance, the specificity of all of these different types of forces and conditions that are at play. So in the winter, we experience a global decrease in energy, and we observe decay. We observe senescence. We observe things dying. And we understand that there are many plant organisms that require that time of coldness and darkness and quiet in order for the seed to properly germinate for the next year, for the next cycle. We know that bears hibernate. We know that geese migrate. We know that there is a rhythm to all of this that is cooperative across a lot of different systems. But we know that this winter period is necessary for these organisms in a lot of different ways. When we're talking about plant biology, we call this the stratifying stage. We say a seed needs stratification, which is to say a period of cold and dark conditions in order for the seed to properly germinate. So we're talking about this stratification that is necessary in order to create the reset and the momentum going into the next cycle. And as the cycle moves through, we know that in the springtime, things are going to bloom, things are going to come back. And that doesn't happen unless the winter was absorbed by the system adequately. Because it's always a feedback loop, and it always requires consideration of where we're at in the cycle. And so the spring needs the winter, and then as we move into summer and things are growing and things are coming to fruit, and then as we move into the far side of this cycle, going from summer into autumn, and the planet has moved around its orbit in a way so that now that tilt is again starting to point away from the sun. In the summertime, it points towards the sun. So the northern hemisphere has the face of the sun. But in the autumn, we are starting to move away now from the sun again. So we're starting to once again experience that decrease in energy. We're starting to know if we have clarity in our predictive processing and in our ability to observe our environment, we know that it's time to harvest, and we know it's time to take the fruit and take what we can and throw the rest in a bonfire, because in the fall, in the autumn time of year, as we observe that transition from a period of high energy to this period of lowest energy, which is where we are today, we know that is part of the cycle, and we get to watch the leaves change colors. And now moving into today, which is the winter solstice, that is when everything has been culminating towards this point of darkness in order to reset, in order to be successful into their next year, into the next cycle. And that entire cycle of the annual orbit, thinking about all of the plants and animals and organisms that are on the planet Earth, and this whole reset so that the spring can be pretty and fun and warm and comfortable. All of these other things have to happen, and they culminate in the darkness, because the seed cannot germinate properly without that episode of cold and dark. So all stages of the cycle are valuable. And homeostasis is the line that the planet Earth adheres to as it moves all the way through that cycle. And we know that homeostasis is observed by our psyche as familiarity. This is our comfort zone. It's observed by our SOMA as a rolling average of our experiences, as the rolling average of all of these physiological feedback loops that are working together, and it is perceived as sensation. So the homeostasis line of the physical body, of the SOMA, is perceived by the psyche as sensation. The psyche contains within it the storyteller. And the storyteller, as we discussed, is the function of our brain which remembers what's been going on and has opinions about what it is observing in our environment. It tells stories. And those stories include opinions which let us decide, what do we need to do about it? How do we need to respond in order to be safe and in order to be successful in our environment in this particular moment? And so as our SOMA and our psyche have this conversation where the SOMA produces sensations that are received and interpreted by the psyche, and the storyteller has an opinion about it that then influences the descending information back to the SOMA. So it is a form of input into our physiological cycles. The opinion of the storyteller is a form of input into our physiological cycles. So when we want to consider what is happening in our physiology, what is happening in our organism environment relationship, then we can start considering these cycles and what's going in and what's coming out, and observing that system as a whole. The inputs into the system, using the example of respiration, the input is going to be the air in our local atmosphere, and our output is going to be primarily carbon dioxide and other mixed gases that are coming back out from our bloodstream, because our physiology filters those compounds out of our bloodstream in the form of dissolved gases, and we exhale through our breath. And the input into that respiratory cycle hopefully contains enough oxygen for us, and hopefully doesn't contain any other things that are not going to be beneficial to our physiology. And that's why it matters what we breathe, because those are the inputs into the system that are going to influence the function of all of our internal cycles. And when we have the output of the system, that's where we get to observe and draw some conclusions about what's happening in the system. The outputs of any of these cycles are what we can observe in order to understand what's happening in the machinery of our lived experience. The outputs of those cycles reflect to us our lived experience. If we're breathing clean air, we're going to exhale carbon dioxide and other healthy observable things. If we are breathing in water, which is not compatible with our respiratory physiology, then we're going to drown. And the output is going to be the observation of death of the organism, which lets us know that something went wrong in the cycle. So considering your cycles and your inputs and your outputs, remember that the output is demonstrating to you your lived experience. So if there's something about your lived experience that you would rather change, we know how to do that. So we can consider, what are we allowing into the organism? What's happening with our boundary system? Those filtration mechanisms that decide what we're going to bring in and what we're going to excrete again. Do we have effective removal of waste? Do we have systems that are effectively doing that job? And how efficiently are all of these things working together? So if you haven't been paying that much attention to what cycles are running for you and what you're taking in and how you're managing all of that, that's okay. Just like the annual planetary cycle of winter, spring, summer, fall, you don't have to pay attention to any of that. You don't even have to believe it. But it will continue to move and it will continue to function, because this is the nature of things. And if you are experiencing something, if you are observing something in the outputs that you would like to change, now is the time. Because now is winter time. And now is the quiet and the dark and the reset, so that we can be successful into the next cycle, so that we can maintain a comfortable homeostasis line. And we want it to be efficient, so that we can make the best use of the energy that we do have, no matter what time of year it is. Thank you for listening. I hope this was useful.